Okay, we're back, wrapping up day 2. How are we doing that? By having 15 or 20 minutes for questions about worldviews. I realize you may have questions that just popped into your head about some of the men we just studied. As long as it's a worldview kind of question, like what was Nietzsche's worldview, I can handle that. But otherwise, this is meant to connect with what you studied in that earlier segment with Bob Kirka, and in was it last week or is it next week? We called it Worldviews B. Is that next week? Next week. So you already may be on schedule processing that, but we're going to stick to worldviews just for the time. So, did you like James Sire, The Universe Next Door? A worldview catalog. It's incredible. I don't know who recommended it to me. I think it was my second year in college. Someone said, you should read this. It was so helpful. I think it should be like assigned reading for anyone who's a Christian in college. And that book's been revised slightly and made better and better. It's just amazing to help us think clearly and be confident. Okay. Don't everyone do it at one time because I'll get overwhelmed. You're sending it telepathically? Okay, well, yeah, there's a word that Sire uses. The long one starting with W. Yeah, which is the German for worldview. Well, they would say Weltanschauung. Welt, world, Anschauung, in the way you look at things. That's all, Weltanschauung. That's fine. Okay, fine. Gave you clarity. You're welcome. Other thoughts? Who doesn't have a worldview? No human has no worldview. Everyone makes sense of the world in a certain way. Even the atheist. A lot of people believe in luck. They believe in causality. They believe that, if they step on the crack, instead of jumping over it, that's going to cause something somewhere. Like the butterfly fluttering its wings, causing the hurricane. Speaking of which, Danielle.
So, I've never been outside the United States. What would you say in your traveling is the biggest?
You've never been outside the United States. For me, traveling outside, what would I say is the greatest?
Yeah, what would you say the greatest misconception of American Christianity has that maybe the rest of the world, or maybe less westernized cultures?
You're asking what is the greatest misconception that Americans have or that others have? Or
Americans would have, as opposed to maybe people with less westernized cultures.
less westernized cultures. Well, I mean, a pretty big thing is we're so individualistic. Most societies are just not like that. You make decisions more as a group, as a team, or you talk to your father or your grandfather, whoever the head of the clan is. We're extremely individualistic, which can be good if you're trying to accomplish stuff. It can be bad as well. We can get lonely, get isolated. I mean, I never forget. I had a 6-month work visa when I moved to England, and it was almost expired. And to be able to stay in the country, because we just planted this church, I had to figure out how to get another job. And I went to the job center in Kentish Town, just next to Camden Town in London, where you haven't been. And I went to the job center, had an appointment, and I spent 45 minutes talking to the officer. Say, the government tries to help people get placements. Didn't really find anything great that day. But I remembered the fellow I talked to because dressed very sharply. He had kind of a plaid tie, but it was a clip-on tie. Oh, I wore those when I was a kid, until I was about 12. And we talked, and anyway, that was that. He was a loner. He lived alone. A couple weeks later, my boss As the first person to reach out to and baptize in London was my boss. Old man. He was 63. He brings in the newspaper, open to the front page, kind of backwards so I can see it. He said, "Is that your man?" That's Dennis Nilsson. You don't recognize that name? You heard of Jeffrey Dahmer? You heard of Charles Manson? Or you don't watch documentaries if they're scary, and I don't blame you. Dennis Nilsson was a serial killer. They had caught him. He was on a clip-on tie because he had used all 14 of his regular ties. Loner. He invited people home. They would sleep together. He was homosexual. He would strangle them with the tie. He would cut them up. He would cook them. He would bury them. And eventually, he got sloppy, started putting it in the communal gutter, and people started complaining about the smell. So the council comes out and they look, and it's human body parts. He goes to jail. They don't do death penalty in UK. Solitary. He complained it was unfair because he can't have a man. Now, I'm not saying that traditional societies never have serial killers, but there's a safeguard built in when there's respect for elders, things are collaborative, you don't go off being alone, you respect people, the system works a certain way. It prevents a lot of the craziness like that. America is recognized outside of America as a country full of crime and guns. And to be honest, my wife, when we moved to the U.S. in '92, she was afraid. And we were moving into the center of a city. We were across the street from the projects and crack vials everywhere. She was afraid. Because the image of America, probably through American TV and films, is that there are criminals everywhere. Everyone's armed. So people are really afraid of that. So there's that perception. So I think we're different there.
But does that level of individualism display a different level of pride?
Does individualism display pride depending on the level? Well, and depending on your accomplishments. As an individual, you can say, okay, forget you, I'm going to run ahead and you could become a millionaire, but then it's lonely. What do you do with that? Americans are confused on that. I think there's probably more good coming out of the country than bad, but probably more places need most of the things America has than the other way around. It's why people want to come here and why people pursue the American dream, but it's a dangerous dream. The rags to riches, Horatio Alger, success story. People want that all over the world. One of the first things I have to do when I'm speaking in other countries, even to churches, I say, just watch out. Watch out for the U.S. Watch out. When you buy the products and you watch the films, be careful. You're not taken in by the American dream. As Christians, we should be living differently, spending our money differently. The American church is very materialistic. And I include the ICOC in that, extremely materialistic. Give a little bit more money than some other denominations, but lifestyle almost identical to that of any other group. And I was asked that same question back in '98. What is it? Well, it was a slightly different question. It was, in the future, what do I see being the biggest challenge to what we're trying to do in our mission? I said materialism. I think it's a lot worse now in the last 18 years. Many older brothers and sisters live exactly like their neighbors. So no wonder they don't have enough faith to share their faith with their neighbors, because they're not really that different and not really planning to be either. So we need some preachers. You didn't expect that. But, this is useful stuff. Worldviews, how you look at the world, the way you live, what you want to be, what you're hoping your life will be. That's a lot of things. This idea, I've got to have a comfy retirement and leave a big inheritance for my kids. You're just as likely to destroy your kids by leaving an inheritance as to help them. Now, Children do not like me to say that in the presence of their fathers, Don't say that. But really, when you were young, did you think, yeah, unless I inherit $100,000, I won't be able to really have a life? No, you'd do anything, work anywhere, sleep anywhere, right? The money is dangerous. Francis of Assisi, I like to study church history. He's a really remarkable guy. He taught that wealth is dangerous. He's the guy brought up very rich, socialite, super popular, and one day he says, I'm giving it all back. He goes to the court. He says, I'm giving back everything to my father, including his clothes. He's standing naked. The magistrate throws a robe over him. He wants to give that back. He's a pretty radical guy. No one can believe it. But the moral power of a guy who said, that's not it. That will interfere with loving God, the riches. People followed him along. He taught wealth was dangerous. If you came across a money bag, you were to pick it up, not with your hands, but with your teeth, and walk over to the nearest dunghill and drop it in the manure. Money is dangerous. I've preached that in 2 sermons in the last 3 years, and I'm sure I'll preach it again. Money is dangerous. Why don't we preach that? Paul said it's a root of all kinds of evil. It's dangerous. Having a lot of money, you feel like you don't need God. What about the prayer of Proverbs 30? Lord, give me neither poverty nor riches, but just my daily bread. Otherwise, I may become poor and steal from you and dishonor my God. Or I may be not be too wealthy and say, who is God? Like I don't need God. Money's dangerous. Actually, I think a lot of the premillennial generation knows that. Premillennial, sorry. The ones who are waiting for Jesus to come back to Jerusalem. Millennial. Premillennial were called, I think it was Generation Y. Okay. X, Y. Boomer, X, Y. Or there's Buster. Boomer, Buster, X, Y. I don't know. What's a generation anyway? 17 years, Now I forgot what I was going to say. So. In the first unit on worldviews, Dr. Kirker presented different worldviews, and he showed kind of a natural progression from one to another. Keep going.
So do you have any anticipation of what's next?
So what might come after where we are now? And what is our current worldview?
To me, I see it as postmodernism.
If we are postmodernism, and if we're postmodern, and I think that's the philosophy of the day, what's to come next? History is very much a series of actions, reactions, overreactions. That's the way history goes. It's the way church history goes. So something really bad happens. It might get worse before it gets better. I did a scary podcast. Last time I was in Rome, I was thinking a lot about Roman history. I did a podcast on why Rome fell and why we should pay attention, why it matters. So looking at not just Rome as described in the book of Revelation, because there's a lot about Rome in Revelation, what's happening, what did happen, how that connects with us. They seemed invincible. It was glory, it was power, it was control, it was the good life, but it was unsustainable. And it was unthinkable that Rome could fall. Well, the U.S. is the Rome of today. It's unthinkable. I cannot personally imagine how we'd fall. But I know from history that, let him who thinks he stands firm, watch out lest he fall. It applies to nations as well. Something else, though?
I just even wonder what do you think people are going to believe next?
What are people going to believe next? Yeah, truth isn't truth. Morality is not moral. Well, it just leads to such a terrible place. It's going to lead to insanity. And then there'll be a backlash. And the bad thing is it could set the stage for a demigod. Not a demigod, maybe a demigod too, a demagogue. A rabble-rouser, someone who gets the people, like a Hitler kind of fellow. Which is dangerous because schools stopped teaching history quite a few years ago when some nuthead said, the important thing is that they get the lessons. They don't need to know the dates. What a stupid move. Without the dates, you don't know the sequence. you don't know what's before what, which means you cannot analyze cause and effect, which means you can't learn the lessons. So students now know no history, no geography. I asked a master's degree student, where's Australia? She was pointing, Africa? Is it in Africa? People have no idea, nor do they care. Half the students think Africa is a country. It's just stunning to me. So there's this anti-intellectualism that we have to fight in the world and in the church. Where's this going to go? I don't know. But, you know, it doesn't really matter where it goes. We're still going to follow Christ. And actually, that would really be the test of our faith. What if we lost our security, lost our wealth? Would we still follow him? Like Job, does he fear you for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around his life? But take away, what he has, and he'll curse you to your face. Satan was wrong. I hope that Satan is wrong about all of us in this room. Okay, I can take one or two more comments. Go ahead, Don.
This is along those lines, because I found that maybe you could just, I'm not sure what my question is, but partly it was, as I looked at the very same thing, it looked like we were talking about these were sequential. This, kind of the pendulum swing.
With Dr. Kirka, things seem to be sequential, even with the pendulum swings.
And I'm not sure, trying to remember Sire, I don't recall him looking at it as a progressive.
And you don't remember Sire looking at it as a progression, because I don't think I've read that book twice. I never saw any progression.
And so when I follow that chronology, I think of Western society, this is where we've come from and where we are, so we're postmodern. But then I think about other cultures, and I see them merely as just a product of their religion.
So you tend to look at the West as product of postmodernism or reflecting it as cause and effect. Other cultures you tend to see as products of other religion. India is that way because of Hinduism. Arabia is that way because of Islam.
Right, and so not seeing a progression.
Without seeing a progression.
Outside of Western society.
But aren't we becoming one global community? I mean, you can fly. Every year I'll have at least 2 flights that are 15 or 16 hours long. It's amazing how quickly you can get around the world now. Ideas, the internet, the use of English, the increasing use of Mandarin, which we're not ready for, but that may be the business language you have to know by the year 2050. I think the Chinese are planning to keep reproducing, by the way, so I think we should pay attention to that. Arabic, already a quarter of the world are Muslims. Now, not a quarter speak Arabic, it's a lot less than that, but that's a very significant language. I don't know, you study history and you could try to make predictions, but the point is to be ready, not to predict. Kind of like with the second coming. Some Thessalonians got all fired up. Paul says, whoa, this is not right. 1 Thessalonians 4:13 and following, 5:1 and 2. Don't try to nail down a day, and in 2 Thessalonians, live a productive life. That's how you'll be ready. You don't sell your stuff and stand on the rooftop in your white garments, like so many cults do every few years. Oh, well, we're in the last minute, which means that we need to wrap this up. It's been a great day looking first at the nature of God's Word. What is the message part of God's Word? What is incidental? What does it mean, inspiration, infallibility, inerrancy? And then looking at people who have shaped and generated ideas in our world, atheists, philosophers. Not all philosophers are atheists, and that's why these are separated. But this is important stuff to know. Their influence on our world and on our worldviews, even our worldviews, may be much more than we realize. Tomorrow morning we'll come back at the same ungodly early hour of 8:30, and we will be looking at science. Why is the universe so big? Like it would take almost 30 billion light years to go across it. And why is it so old? And are we alone?